There we go.
That's what happens when folks leave the room. Uh,
Yeah.
anyway, we just had hosted first, welcome to the September meeting. We just hosted a nice announcement from Aaron Boyce about a community meeting with the mayor that's happening next week. Um, and Detective Fallows. Sorry to do that weird interruption.
Nope, you are fine. Sorry, let me pull up. And okay, so yeah, let's talk about Jefferson Park. So we've been doing a lot of really, really, really good work in Jefferson Park as a police department. Our units have been at there pretty much daily doing work and um I think making a huge impact in a positive way for the community over there. So to address a little bit of what you talked about with the press release about the bees games and possible uptick. So what happened with that is we were asked by some community members if that was a correlation. And so what I think what maybe we were talking about in that press release was essentially we have been focusing on efforts during the bees games to see if that was an accurate if there was an uptick in drug related sales and things like that in regards to the bees games and things like that. And so um, my understanding is there's no correlations that has been proven one way or the other right now. So I think what was probably I'm trying to see if I can find the news article so I can see exactly what he said. But essentially what we were doing was we wanted to make sure that there wasn't an uptick related to the bees games. And generally, from like my standpoint as the DCLO for the area, generally the more eyes you have in the area, and we're talking a little bit about SEPTED principles, and I know we've talked about that here before in the past, crime prevention through environmental design. That's what SEPTED stands for. Generally, the SEPTED principles that we follow are the more eyes in the area, the less crime there is because people feel less they feel less able to be able to commit the crimes. Most crimes are trying to be done in secret and things like that, especially drug deals. Whereas obviously, yes, we do see them in the open sometimes in the community, and it does happen for sure. I wouldn't say that there's necessarily a direct correlation one way or the other that we know of right now. Again, we were just kind of we had some complaints from the community that we were looking into about is there a correlation between those two things, and um, so yeah, let me look at that press release that you put up there. So essentially, that's what we were doing. So we've had a lot of really, really good work from our homeless resource center squad doing outreach there as part of their nexus to the Gail Miller Resource Center. We've had also doing operations of their own. We've had just our specialty units of all different kinds, bikes. Some of the things that I can't really get into in detail right now because just there's ongoing things happening. But I do want to definitely give a huge shout out to all those units that I think are making a huge impact in that park. So as things kind of get more, as those cases kind of become more closed, um, and we can talk about them more, then I'll highlight them in future meetings on some of the really, really amazing things we've been able to do over at Jefferson Park in the last probably 3 weeks to a month. But just know that it is very much on the radar. It is very much being given a lot of attention, and they're doing some phenomenal police work over there. So hopefully, if you're a resident over by Jefferson Park, you're starting to feel that the Jefferson Park has been a little bit better. From my understanding, just talking to Sergeant Meinzer and just driving by myself and things like that. And of course, we don't live in the area, so if you live in the area, you might see obviously a lot more. But the park has looked pretty good. Maybe not all the time, but again, like the times that we've been able to go through, it's looked pretty good. So that's been a huge focus of the department lately is our parks. Um, so are there any questions on specific to Jefferson Park?
I know we've got one in the room and we might have some online.
What's the one in the room? Let's hear that one first.
Kevin, you're gonna
Can
have
I
to
be
speak.
heard from here or do you need to listen? Do you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
You mentioned that a reduction in crime there. Almost every day I drive by there and I see people doing drugs open. Now, again, I haven't probably within the last 5 days, so I'm going to give that caveat. But short of that, I see people doing drugs in the open, in broad daylight there. As you mentioned, people usually prefer not to be caught, and so they do their crimes where they don't think they will be caught. And since they're doing them there, that makes me think they won't be caught or face any consequence there. We literally had someone stabbed in broad daylight with no indication of. It took, I believe, about 7 minutes for police to arrive, and the guy was going to finish him off. There was no indication that there was any concern about being caught. So that has, it appears to have become a place where people don't expect enforcement of the law. You can drive by almost any time and see people doing drugs in the open. And there's assaults, and that stabbing is not an isolated incident. It's just one that happened to come to the attention of police. So I'm concerned when you say that you feel that it's been reduced. Maybe it hasn't reduced. Maybe it was worse before. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done there. And while, of course, we appreciate the effort, and we know it's not easy. A more visible presence might be more useful than whatever things you're unable to mention. Maybe a visible presence might serve more of a deterrence there. My understanding is that you're pushing to pull people to reduce the deleterious population in Liberty Park, and they're pushing into Jefferson Park and just kind of filling our neighborhood.
So you've asked a few different questions, so I'll try and address a couple of different ones. So we absolutely are having marked police presence in the park. I would say daily. It's at different times of the days, it's at different hours of the days, and of course we can't be there all the time, right? And you're not wrong. If we're not there, then it's not necessarily going to stop people from doing the drugs. So there are certain things that we just don't have any control over as a police department, or as people. People are going to commit crimes. We're not going to do any, we do the best we can to prevent them, to stop them, but it's going to happen. So we can't be everywhere all at once. We have one bike unit for the entire Liberty squad, which is everything south of 8 South and east of the freeway, all the way up in the mountains. So that's a very, very, very large area of Salt Lake City. That's the dedicated bike squad that we have. We've got, our units that are working their best to hit that park constantly. We've got Sergeant Meinzer with the HRC squad, who is taking time out of their day away from the Gil Miller with the nexus of trying to do some outreach and trying to make, prevent the drug use, make an arrest if necessary over there, that kind of stuff. But again, we're not going to be there all the time. So I can understand the frustration. I understand what you're saying, but a stabbing happening over there. We haven't had a violent crime in that park for some time. A stabbing did happen, absolutely, and it's a tragic thing. But again, we can't stop every single crime that's going to happen in the city. We just can't. And we got there in 7 minutes. That's a great response time. We dealt with the situation. It just is what it is, unfortunately. So things are going to happen, but you have to remember too that we are giving. So back to the Liberty Park thing, I think for sure you're absolutely right. Probably some of the stuff from the Liberty Park has pushed over into Jefferson Park. And that's why we're giving it the attention that it needs. We're doing the best we can, again, with all the different parks. We have community members from all my different community councils that are, frustrated with their parks. And so we're doing the best we can with what we have. And so part of that is going to be, yes, you might get a little bit of overflow from other areas. The thing is, and this is a complicated issue, because you're absolutely right. When we deal with one issue in a park, it's going to push to other places, right? They don't just disappear into thin air and go away. That's not how it works, right? And so we try to focus on the big players, the drug dealers and things like that are causing the issues, that are bringing the attention to the park. But those things do take time. And so you're not going to necessarily see, I think that there's an improvement at that park. I would disagree with you. I'm sorry, but that's just, from what I've seen number wise, from what I've seen from our patrol division, from what I've seen talking to my sergeant, talking to our lieutenants who drive by there constantly. I drive by there. I don't think that the park is as bad as it has been in the past. So we are doing a lot of work over there. But again, we're not there all the time. And so maybe when we're not there is what you're seeing, people, using drugs openly and things like that. Again, we're not going to stop it all the time. We're just not. So we do the best with the resources we have. So I don't know if that answers your questions, but that's that is what it is, I guess. You got any follow-up for that?
We're not attacking that. We don't expect it to be superheroes who can achieve everything, obviously, right? I mean, nobody can. Like you said, you can't prevent crime from occurring. But it is concerning that it's occurring in places that we've set aside specifically for our children to recreate.
Absolutely.
Our parks. And I haven't seen the improvement, and I do drive by there quite frequently. do notice people using drugs quite openly with no concern, quite frequently, almost every day there. Like I said, in the last 5 days or so, I've had other things that are going on in other places, so I haven't been in the neighborhood as much as I normally am. So I'll give you that. Next last 5 days, maybe. Prior to that, though, I regularly see people just using drugs as the ultimate concern. I'm concerned about residue left over for children who really wandering there to play, and I would love to see maybe, there are crimes. Having drugs is a crime, and people being arrested and actually held accountable and pushed into our system where they can be forced into treatment, for example, or to address their challenges, or to figure something out and recognize that Salt Lake City and specifically Jefferson Park and the neighborhood ballpark are not hospitable places for crime.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And
West doesn't have a homeless problem, and I'm not attacking homeless people. I'm just saying them in particular. That's just one challenge. They don't have camping problems because they don't allow that, and they address it proactively.
who doesn't have those problems?
West Valley, not so much. There, you don't see people camping all over West Valley because they address that proactively. And I'm not attacking homeless. That's not where I'm going with it. I'm just using that specifically. I've had homeless people say to me, "I can't sleep in West Valley because I will be arrested," and so they sleep in Salt Lake. And I'm not saying, again, don't connect homelessness with drug use. I'm just using that as an example of a city ordinance that is enforced that affects the occurrence of that behavior. I would love to see people recognizing that the ballpark is not a place where drug use is accepted.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I 100% agree. And like you said, and like I said, it's one of those things where it's going to take time to solve, some of the issues in the parks, and so that's what we're working on. It's not going to be an overnight thing, and like you said, and I 100% agree with you. We kind of need to make that a place known that, hey, if you come here, you deal with these issues, then you're going to be arrested. Drug dealing, drug use, things like that. So but again, it's a process that is not a quick process. And
see if Lloyd's okay. Are you all right, Lloyd? Sorry, I was just worried that maybe you got hurt. I'm sorry.
Sorry, we're seeing Lloyd on our end. Detective Fallows, no problem.
okay, I was like, I don't.
Just making sure you don't have like a heart attack or something. Sorry, fellas.
We've got a couple more questions online too that we should let people have the opportunity to ask or share their experience. Jess,
hello, Detective Fallows. Thank you so much for being present and showing up at this meeting to speak with us who live here in the ballpark neighborhood. I do want to let you know I really appreciate the time that you're taking to address us. And talking about, I just actually had an experience this morning where I called the Salt Lake Police Department non-emergency line when I saw someone go to throw a blanket over their head in the middle of the sidewalk at Jefferson Park to more than likely start doing drugs, because now they do drugs under the blanket. And I'm like, hey, I saw someone, they're both blocking the sidewalk and they're like initiating like doing drugs in public. And I kind of get hit with a, well, did you actually see the drugs? And I'm like, no, but I live in a neighborhood that I've come to understand that that's how people do drugs. And so like, yeah, I think I'm getting frustrated, like getting caught up in the semantics, talking with dispatch. They're like,
understandable.
Yeah, just like, well, did you see the drugs? Like, you've had people leering at you for the last 3 hours on the sidewalk, but like, were they setting up an encampment? Were they blocking the sidewalk? And it's like, no, but they're doing drugs under a blanket and staring at me. And they've been doing drugs in public all day long. And so yeah. I'm feeling frustrated with like the cement, like when I do my due diligence as a citizen who lives in this neighborhood and I see something and I say something and I get hit with a just minutia for, I don't know.
You're talking about the dispatch side of it. Do I understand that correctly?
The what?
The dispatch side of it?
Yeah, the dispatch side of things.
So I'm working on that, and you're not the first person to talk to me about this issue.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working with my lieutenant and my captain on like, hey, can we talk to the dispatch supervisors about like, don't argue with my citizens about what's going on. Just if they're reporting it, put it on the call screen and let us respond to it and let us determine if it's an issue or not. Right. And so that is something I'm working on. It's frustrating for me too. So I am working on it though. Just be aware of that. because you're not the first person that's told me like, hey, we've had some of these issues where I call into dispatch and dispatch is basically telling me like, well, we're not going to send an officer, or, like you said, questioning you. And here's the thing, understand that dispatch tries to get as much information as they can, right? So they're going to ask you all those kinds of questions. Like, so sometimes, if they're asking you if there's drug use and you do suspect it, then, just say, yes, I suspect drug use, or you don't necessarily have to get in an argument with them. And I'm not saying you're doing that. I'm just saying, and you've probably done that. Like, I'm sure you've done everything you can to try and explain it properly. So like I said, I'm working on that issue. It's not perfect, um, but you're not the first person that's come up with that to me. So I am working on that.
Thank you. And I did have one other question. I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. So I live right by Jefferson Park, and I'm pretty chatty, and I've talked to some of the people, over my time living here who were more lucid. And a constant that I encounter is that, like, I'll be like, oh, how long have you lived in Salt Lake? And they'll be like, I'm just passing through, man. I've been here for like 2 weeks. It seems like a chill place to hang out. So, and I get that kind of the gist of that response consistently from people who are in the homeless population.
Okay.
That they're not from here, that these aren't people who were born and raised in our community. These aren't people who've been ingrained in our community for a long time. And especially this summer, I'm seeing a lot more vagranty faces. I was really intensely verbally accosted by a man who I've never seen since in this neighborhood at one point. But like, is there a plan to like not have this be like the hip stopping point for like every like drug seller and junkie? And like a lot of these people, I talk to them and they're like, oh, that guy's a fucking asshole. He tried to rob me while I was sleeping, so I beat the shit out of him. And so it's like these people aren't even being neighborly to each other. They're screwing each other over. They're all very much seem like they're in like a vagrant state where there's not even like a cohesive community among the unhoused in the area. And so is there anything being done by the Salt Lake Police Department to mitigate this specific issue where it seems like people are traveling and settling down here for anywhere from like a couple hours to a couple months?
Yeah.
Because I'm not into that, because these are people who have no accountability in the community and act with no accountability.
Yeah, and that's fair. So the one thing that we can't do obviously is criminalize like homelessness itself or people visiting parks, things like that. And that's not what you're saying. I get that. I'm just bringing this to a point. So, so if someone is passing through, obviously they have every right to enjoy a park. What they don't have a right to do is like sell drugs, use drugs, assault people, things like that, right? So you asked, what are we doing? Yeah, we're doing lots of things. We've had lots of ongoing operations with like drugs, and the thing we want to try and focus on is the dealers, right? Because the dealers are the ones that cause the problem, right? So if you take down the dealer, then you take away the supply and you take away the demand, and then you take away the issue, right? That's just kind of how it works. And so again, and these things can take time. So we've done a lot of really, really good work in the park so far. That doesn't mean that I'm not saying we've solved the issue. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we've done a lot of really good work in the park. And so what that means is we're going to continue to work on the park and continue to work on, the drug dealing issues and things like that. And so, it's like again, we can't be there all the time. And so when we can't be there, then things are going to pop back up and things like that are going to happen. But as we progressively and aggressively go after the dealers and things like that, eventually it will start to normalize the other issues that come with it. And so, yes. So to answer your question, what are we doing? We're doing lots of operations, and I mean lots of operations over there. That park is getting a lot of attention. I understand that to some of you it may not feel that way, and that sucks because we are working very hard. And again, it's not just like our one bike unit. We have our captain and our lieutenant, the chief. They've made it a priority with a lot of our different specialty units. To give this specific park some attention, a lot of attention. So, so yeah, that's what we're doing. So we are addressing the issue. And uh, you know, I understand that it's not as quick as people want it to be, but we are doing something. So we're doing operations. We're sending our bike unit there. Lieutenant, Sergeant Meinzer squad has been going out there on a very regular basis. And we're trying to hit it from every angle, right? We're not just doing drug sales and things like that. We're trying to do outreach as well with our different units, our social workers. We're trying to hit it from like every different angle to help get people either into housing or get them out of the park to do, into the shelter, or maybe get them some assistance other ways too. So we're trying to hit it from every angle, not just an angle of like, well, let's arrest everybody and things like that. So we're just trying to do the best we can with all the different resources we have.
Thank you very much, Detective Fallows. Yeah, I guess some of the officers I've spoken to, I wish believed it a little more, because I've got kids and they're like, I wouldn't raise a family here. And so maybe addressing within the department that mentality towards the neighborhood could help.
Yeah, for sure. And
thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the information. And Canada, I think you've had your hand up for a while. Can I do for you?
Been asking to unmute that same person. Maybe they aren't in a position where they can be unmuted at the moment. Oh, I don't know why I can't unmute. I've asked you to unmute a few times, but maybe they need their.
Yeah, I just didn't want to unmute while Jess was still talking.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, I live in C9 flat, so I have a balcony that overlooks the park. So I'm always seeing what's going on. And I think, at least for me, I don't know, I guess I'd like to see us be more thoughtful about like the systemic issues we're facing. Because like Fallows said, arresting people is only going to throw people in jail, and that's going to cost the taxpayers more money. And then, if we are pushing people, it's not like they disappear, right? So it really is an issue that we like have to contend with as a community, that like there is homelessness in the city. And like I feel like that's an unpopular place to like sit, but like this is our community, and like we have to figure out how to be, think long term and short term about, the cost of housing and all these other things. So, at least for me, like I go to city council a lot and try to talk about why people are homeless and why people are using drugs, right? I don't think, especially with fentanyl, which is so dangerous, I don't think people like are like clicking their heels to be in that position. So I don't know. I think I have a lot more compassion when I'm looking out there and seeing all these folks, and like, I don't know. I guess I just like feel like, it's not, pushing them around is not going to help. And again, I don't have like, I don't think any of us have the solution, but I don't know. I think this would be a good time to like think about, how do we engage with folks, or how do we help build up the community. I don't know. So there actually, last comment I have is a church and state. The owner who I know, she like talks to the unhoused folks who are around the area a lot, and has like people who are looking out and, trying to avoid like, dealers coming around, and more kind of violent folks coming around. So I don't know, just some thoughts that might not just be call the police and throw people in jail. Because again, that's going to cost way more money from my taxes to do that.
Yeah, so I appreciate those comments. And I agree with you on a lot of things. I think that, and again, that's why we try to get like our social workers involved and things like that. Our social workers have done a lot of work as well, like at Liberty Park, at Jefferson, at the Artesian Well, different places, to try and connect people to resources who want it. I think the hardest part of homelessness and on those types of things is most people, and we all know this, right, aren't going to change until they're ready to change, until they're ready to make that change. So we just do the best we can to provide all different kinds of resources. So if that resource has to be jail, then that is what it is. But if the resource can be a social worker who can get them into a bed for the night, or who can get them into a program, and they're willing to, then we can, we definitely try to do that too. And that's why we have full-time social workers that are working, I want to say all but like 6 hours of the day now. I think they're almost 24/7. So, the police department, the city, they've done a lot to bolster up that program because it has been successful for us. And it's been nice as police officers when we do have to respond to these types of calls, or someone who is in crisis, whether it be drug related or not, we can get, our social workers out there to deal with it. And we can, as a uniform, we can kind of just back off and let them deal with it. So I do appreciate your comments, because it is both sides of it. And it is a complicated issue for sure. Mr. John Margette, sir.
Sorry, just unmuting there. Detective Fallows, I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for all your service, and Sergeant Meisner, we appreciate it, especially from the business community along 300 West there. The question that I had, you may be aware, but we had a graffiti issue where we got tagged pretty bad, our business and a business adjacent. Have you seen just generally an uptick in that kind of behavior, graffiti around the neighborhood, or is it about the same and we were just the unlucky recipients this week or something? Just curious what you're seeing there.
So I just talked to Sergeant Miner about this today, because I was not aware of it until today, but because he deals a lot with the 300 West side of everything.
Yeah.
And he does a great job. But yeah, so he told me that there was a group of, I think it was juveniles, but I'm not 100%, just a group of individuals, possibly juveniles, who went through and tagged a lot of businesses and stuff. I don't think that it's necessarily like an uptick in the sense that it's happening all the time. I think it was like they came in and like hit a bunch of businesses and walls and things like that. So if it continues, keep me and Sergeant Miner in the loop immediately so we can,
Yeah.
start to see that. But I don't think it's an uptick per se. I think it was like a kind of somewhat of an isolated incident where like a group of individuals came in and just did a bunch of graffiti vandalism.
Yeah. Okay. And just so you know, I did reach out to many other businesses in the surrounding blocks there, and nobody else had any issues. So
Okay.
from my perspective, it does look like it was just a random act. And so, but
Yeah.
anyway, just curious if you're seeing something wider spread than just a couple of blocks there. So,
Yeah, I don't think so. Not that I've been made aware of. And like I said, I just talked to Miner about it today.
okay. Well, thanks for your guys' efforts. And also, Sergeant Meisner continues to deserve a huge shout out. We've seen a dramatic decrease in criminal type activity in our neighborhood, at least on the 300 West side, due to his efforts there. So thank you.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal sergeant. His squad does phenomenal work, and they work really hard on that 300 West corridor to kind of help with all
Yeah.
that. So, and we really appreciate his squad.
And can I just mention one other thing? Earlier in the conversation, there was some discussion about dispatch. I just want to throw this out to the community at large. As my experience with dispatch, I found that if I could tell them, hey, I've got photographs, or I have video, or there's neighboring businesses that have video of this thing happening, they were very interested in that and took very seriously what I was saying. So it seems to me that as we're engaging with dispatch, if we have photos or if we have other kinds of evidence, that they really pay attention to that. So that's just my experience. So
yeah, thank you, John. And so on that subject real quick, because it did come up in the chat from Frazier. I think that so first and foremost, any videos and photos you do get, make sure that you can do so safely. If you can't, then don't worry about it, right? That's the first and foremost. If you can get them, that is great. And I can definitely talk to dispatch about not asking people to go get them if they, but I think the idea behind it is it kind of helps us as the police department. Because here the hardest thing with patrol and drug use is it's a misdemeanor crime that's not occurring in our presence, right? And Utah state law is pretty clear on what we can and can't do with misdemeanor crimes that do and do not occur in our presence. There are many caveats that, like domestic violence, thefts, things like that. But there are some laws that we need to be either witnessing it personally, or the Utah state law says that we can use our other senses, meaning sight, smell, hearing, which would include video, right? And pictures. And so um it's we all know, and this isn't, we're not generalizing here, right? But we all know that it's a common practice for some people when they use drugs to throw a blanket over their head so that they're not being seen openly per se, and to use it. It's also a common practice for people to get warm that way, right? So it's not, I'm not generalizing here. What I'm saying is as my personal training experience as a police officer, I've seen that myself, where I've actually arrested people doing it, where we go up, make contact, pull the blanket off, and there they are shooting up. So it is something that happens. So like Jess was saying, so if you but on the police side of things, when we get there, when they've already shot up and everything's put away and everything's locked away or everything's thrown away by that point or whatever it is, it's so hard for patrol to take immediate action on something because we weren't there to personally witness it or something like that. Videos can definitely help, and it's not a perfect thing. Like patrol is, you know, the officers come, they do the best they can with their training, with their experience, what they're comfortable arresting people for. Like as a police officer, you have to understand the charges that you're arresting someone for. Obviously, you have to have the elements of the crime met. So you have to make sure that, you know, because we have to worry about violating people's Fourth Amendment rights and violating people's you know, right to search and seizure and all these things. And all these things come up as a police officer. And so we have to make sure that we are first and foremost protecting people's rights as Americans and as just as human beings. And so those are first and foremost. The rest of it comes through investigation and things like that. So if we have video, pictures, things like that, it can definitely help in our investigation of dealing with, even if at a minimum it's like, hey, look, I have a picture here. You had a blanket over your head. You know, I'm not going to arrest you for it, but were you using? Yes. Okay. Well, here's what we're going to do. You're going to be trespassed from this location, or if it's a park, it's a little bit more complicated, but you know, if it's a business or something like that, we will, you know, it helps us to do a better investigation. So if you can comfortably, safely get video or a picture, or if you just have like cameras on your house or something like that, where it's, you know, it's just recording all the time, then that's great for us. That helps us significantly. So if not, again, it's okay. We just I don't want anybody to put themselves in any kind of risk or, you know, any issues that way. So just to kind of cover what John was talking about. Are there any other questions?
This is why. And it's not really a question, it's maybe just kind of a rebuttal or kind of a reframe on something that was mentioned by Canada. And I say it in front of you because I think that's relevant to Detective Fallows. Sometimes arresting people is going to be the solution and is actually going to make change. And the police can help solve the problem, because I just looked it up. In 2021, we had 5,900 people in the state prison. That's 5,900 people for the entire state, and we have less now. It's a smaller prison than we have now. So it's very hard to get to prison, and it's very hard to stay in jail. Our jails are rather porous. I imagine that our jail has far fewer people. When people are arrested, they're taken before our court system. Our court system is very rehabilitative. It's very focused on rehabilitation. The Justice Reinvestment Initiative came out in 2015, I believe. We worked very hard. We had troubleshooting courts, mental health court, drug court, homeless court, veteran court. Most of our courts are troubleshooting in nature. And as you said, Detective Fallows, people won't change until they're ready to, or until it's been made clear that this won't be tolerated. So they have options. They go before their judge and they make a deal. They make an agreement. And they say, hey, I will address this. I'll go into treatment in exchange for not being incarcerated. The vast majority of our citizenry here, despite this, are not incarcerated. The vast majority of people who are arrested do not remain incarcerated for more than a couple of hours. In fact, it's very hard to stay in jail. If you've ever read the pretrial services matrix, you almost have to kill someone to stay in jail, and you can get out of jail, go kill someone, and then come back and hopefully stay in jail for a few minutes. It's very hard to stay in jail. We work very hard as a society to rehabilitate people once they get to the criminal justice system. But some people don't have the ability to pull themselves out until they're brought to that reality of, okay, there's a judge, and the judge has the ability to incarcerate me and is choosing not to in exchange for my guarantee that I'll attend this treatment. And then they have access to resources they might not otherwise have. They get a probation officer, for example. I met a guy today. I spoke to a guy today who just finished his probation. And he was so proud of himself because his life some time ago was his life had been spiraling, but he had resources, he had an officer, he had treatment, he had case management, he had all those things that he wouldn't have gotten had he not been arrested, brought before a judge, and then released to go do all the things that he needed to do to get his life in order with support rather than sleeping out in Jefferson Park doing drugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that comment. And I certainly think that it's multifaceted. So yeah, it absolutely arresting can help, can change people's lives. I know lots of people that I've talked to that jail was the first step in them getting clean, staying clean, getting on a good program. Sometimes prison was that pathway. So it's multifaceted. And I 100% agree with you on that. Like arresting can absolutely help solve a problem. And it does a lot of times. Just not necessarily every single time, right? And that's all I was trying to highlight is that we come at it with many different resources to try and fix the problem, essentially.
We need all those different levels of intervention because they're gonna attract people at different levels of the downward spiral, right?
Yeah.
And if we skip the very lowest level of intervention, i.e. direct incarceration, then we're missing the people who need it the most. There are some who will respond, the caseworkers going out to Jefferson Park and saying, hey, you could go to the homeless youth resource or the homeless resource center, homeless youth resource center, which won't take them anyways because they have no resources or whatever. There are some who will respond to that and some who will try to access resources. And there are some who unfortunately require a bit of coercion, an option of, look, you cannot live this way in our society. It's dangerous. I don't want my kids playing in a park where there's used needles because you're shooting up on their park.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Just saying.
No, you're 100% correct. Was there any other questions, comments, chat, or otherwise?
Yeah, Detective Fallows, I have one.
Sure.
I was really struck by, the language about the uptick in opportunistic crime in Jefferson Park being linked to large crowds associated with baseball games. And I agree with your comments earlier. We think of SEPTED principles, we think of large activating events not causing more issues for communities. But, some of our other parks are located close to where other large crowd events happen, right? Like Liberty Park is going to be a couple blocks away from the 9th and 9th Street Festival, and that's going to happen in a couple of weeks. Pioneer Park hosts the Saturday Downtown Farmers Market once a week. So is there a similar level of concern about those events? Is there something about Jefferson Park that makes it unique in this regard? And the other thing is we need to be thinking about this in the sense of how are we going to activate the ballpark space, for the next 2 years? I think we want to focus on activating not being a negative thing.
Yeah, I don't think that that's how we meant it. And maybe some things maybe got a little misconstrued or maybe, I don't know. I'm telling you right now, what my understanding of it is that we had some questions about it from the community that was, is there a nexus between the Bees games and an uptick in drugs in the park or in the area? And that we had done a few operations around the Bees games to see if there was a correlation. And again, just it's anecdotal right now, right? Because like we haven't done any like in-depth studies of our crime stats to see if there is a nexus right now. This is something that has just kind of been asked. But in speaking to like Sergeant Meinzer, my bike squad that's down there often, especially during these Bees games, things like that, I don't think that there's a nexus between those two things. If again, I've had some pretty extensive training with like the crime prevention, the SEPTED. The general feeling is that the more eyes you have on the road, on the street, the more activation you have, the less crime that occurs. I think we've seen that in Ballpark with the different events that we've had, that we've, over the last few years that we've activated more, and so I don't think that there's anything to be concerned with that. I think that it was more just trying to see if there was a correlation. And I think the idea behind the correlation is it providing more people in the area to sell to? I guess maybe that's what they were thinking. I don't 100% know, to be 100% honest. But I don't think it is. I think when we're following SEPTED principles, when we're looking at me talking to my bike unit and things like that, um, I think that we are not necessarily seeing that. So I don't know. Um, I think that the press release was more to see if there was a correlation rather than there is a correlation, like as a definitive statement. Does that make sense or no?
I'm glad to hear your perspective. It doesn't read that way. Um, but it's helpful to hear from multiple police officers that that hasn't exactly been their experience. Because again, we don't want to make our ballpark less active for community safety purposes. I think that feels like backwards thinking.
Yeah, and so to be clear too, it's talking about opportunistic crimes as well that is mentioned. Is that correct, Amy?
In one point, it mentions opportunistic crimes, and then another point, it mentions drug traffickers taking advantage of high traffic to conduct illegal activity out of view. And I don't think that's opportunistic crime necessarily. I think of opportunistic crime being something like a smash and grab of more cars being parked in the neighborhood for an event. How do you think of it?
Yeah, so to me, an opportunistic crime is more like, um, there's more cars, so there's more opportunity to break into those cars and steal things from the vehicles. Like that would be an opportunistic crime, right? Or you leave your vehicle unlocked and the purse is or your wallet is sitting in plain view. Um, that would be like an opportunistic crime. Or you're walking down an alleyway by yourself and you get mugged and they rob you. Like that would be an opportunistic crime. Um, that's how I view it. But it's generally property related, I would think. Um, in Canada, did you have another question?
Just a yeah, I was just curious what was meant by opportunistic crime. That makes sense. I mean, if there's more people, I think there's more opportunity where, someone first locked their car. I mean, when there's a ballpark game, like there's so many cars parked on the street. Um,
Yeah.
the other thing I will say is I think, having less like developed areas makes it just like, if there's less people walking around, I agree with you, Amy, like the less activation there is, it's like the less eyes on people. I mean, I think there's tons of studies that show like dark alleyways or, places with less foot traffic tend to be higher in like crime. So I think the building across from C9 Flats like is abandoned. I don't know what the situation with that is, but it's abandoned and people hang out there. Um, so yeah, it's just like I think also that's a piece of it too, is continuing to develop the ballpark and like having higher density, and that will make people, more people around and more people at the park. And I think that will help not solve the issues, but will help somewhat.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's actually medical literature showing that if you flip abandoned houses, you get a reduction of gun crime in the area. And that was a study that came out of some medical researchers in Philadelphia. So it's
Yeah,
not just an aesthetic thing, wanting our abandoned homes to be occupied and activated, right?
absolutely. Yeah, and that's something we've been focusing on a lot, citywide for sure, but in ballpark especially is the violent crime, right? And
Which is way down. Yeah.
that's how
Sorry.
it
So
started.
happy about that.
Like our violent crime for the 3 year average is down 27.6%, right? And the property crime is down 22.5%, and total between the two is down 23%. So we focused on like the violent crime. We're focusing on these things, which is, and I agree with in Canada, yeah, violent crime is definitely a huge concern. It's not to say that drug use isn't a concern, of course, but so we've been focusing on those types of things. We can focus on the drug use and other things uh, as well now that we've kind of have some of the violent crime under control and things like that. And again, we can't be everywhere at once. We can't control every little thing that people do, right? People are going to commit crimes. It doesn't matter what you or I do. It has happened since depending on what you believe, just it has happened since the beginning of time, right? So, um, crimes have been committed by people always. And so we just do the best we can. And I think that the hard work is shown um in the numbers, but again, the drug stuff is important and that's what we're focusing on now. So,
Sergeant Fallows, I'm just showing that awesome data, showing the drop because
perfect. Thank you.
good. And I'll throw in the chat the link if anybody wants to look up that data themselves. We've got this relatively new, beautiful interface to look at these kinds of things, and it's nice to see. Detective Fallows, one more question, kind of tangential, kind of not. Do we have a new alternative to the SLC mobile app?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I've been so busy today. I was not able to get back to your email before, but we do. Yeah, they have updated it to that City Protect, and that City Protect is like, I believe it's like an internal thing that we brought in, kind of like everything we're doing, like how we brought like all the crime stats internal, everything is internal. We're just kind of bringing everything in under that unit that does those things, and so the City Protect also serves as like our online. So and on the drug use stuff. Obviously, we're super well aware of Jefferson Park and what's going on. We're doing operations, but I want to put out a resource for everyone that is our submit a tip, which is also through the City Protect. I don't have a presentation. Maybe next month I can get that together and we can do a presentation on like how to utilize the new City Protect stuff for like the reporting because we have it. It's like it's integrated into everything now. Like our online reporting system for crimes is utilized through that. Our tip submission for like drugs, prostitution, things like that also utilizes City Protect. And then I believe the SLC mobile app is all going to all those things. So I'm going to put a link up in the chat for everyone to our tip line. If you're seeing drug dealing going on, I mean, even if you see it at Jefferson Park, this is a great way to submit a tip where our drug unit can get usable information from our citizens to look for the dealers and things like that, right? And so if you're seeing that and you can't, again, we've talked about this, but if you can safely get a picture, a video, anything, if you can't, that's fine. Just put in the details of what you've seen and what try and get descriptions and things like that. But you can utilize this and it goes. So if you, for instance, if you put drug as the incident type, then it will just go directly to our special investigations unit who does the drug stuff. And so that way they have some usable tips and information to work with. So if you're saying, hey, on this date, this time I saw drug dealers and they're already running these operations, like I said, we're already doing these things, it'll give them usable information. So the next time they're there, they can go, oh yeah, there's the guy that we saw in the tip. They can start watching things like that. So it's a good resource to utilize. And if you don't live by Jefferson Park and you are seeing other issues with drug dealing going on or drug use going on in an alleyway or a different park or whatever, like it's really good to use for those things. So I just want to put that in there for everybody to utilize that if they get an opportunity to do that.
Crime dashboard question.
All right, crime dashboard question. Let's hear it, Kevin.
The stats that were listed on that dashboard that was shown, are those calls or are those charged crimes?
Well, so probably the correct verbiage would be more like a general offense report written. So not necessarily a charged crime, but it's a crime where we wrote a report on it compared. So the calls for service are different, and that's a different link that you can look at on our website. The crime stats come from crime reports. So our general offense reports. So, which is like a victim who called us, we took a report, whether we arrested someone or not, regardless, it's a crime stat, right? And so those come from those are like hard numbers. And on that as well, let me pull it back up. They are going to be expanding. So when we first, I don't know if you haven't been around for a while, it hasn't changed much, but if you've been around for a while, the crime stat website used to have quite a few more different types of crime, like to include like drug use, vandalisms, things like that. Their plans to expand, so you can kind of see like the violent offenses and the property offenses. So they're going to be expanding those lists to include more crime types so that we can get a better picture of what's going on in the neighborhoods rather than just the major violent crimes and the major property crimes. Because I know that the community councils, that was a helpful tool in the past for some of the smaller, some of the lower level crimes, but so we could still track it. We as a department obviously still track it, but on the what's available to the public readily, when they brought everything in-house and updated our own crime stat website, which looks 100% different than we're used to. Amy will remember. I think it's better because it's got the charts and the graphs and everything super cool. They're going to expand that list quite significantly. And they were hoping to do it hopefully by the end of the year, but as soon as we can, for sure, because it's information that, my communities want still. So I've talked with them and they are definitely planning on doing that. So.
One final question. Is there a backlog on detectives to process these calls?
Say it again?
Is there a backlog for detectives processing these calls after the report is taken and I assume it's transferred to a detective? And is there something holding that slowing that process? Is there a backlog? Is there too large a case number? Do we need more detectives? Is that something the city might be able to respond to or needs to respond to increase the capacity? More detectives, more cops.
Yeah, so a lot like how we kind of do everything, our detectives will prioritize reports based on, like, first and foremost, if someone has been arrested and is currently in jail, because we have a certain amount of time to file, right, to be able to keep them there, and it's a big process, but we have to get it filed as soon as we can. So they prioritize those cases first. So there's always kind of like what we would call, not necessarily a backlog, but what we would call a detective queue, where they work on the cases they have. So I guess it's somewhat of a backlog, but it's just kind of how it works. Like it goes into their queue. They take the cases that have we call them jail cases, where someone's been arrested, and they work on those first to get those screened, get all those things done, any follow-up that needs to be done. And then as they get those done, then they work on their other cases in their queue. So, for instance, not every theft call that's called in goes to a detective queue, because a lot of times there's no suspect information, no video, no follow-up. So those just get closed out because there's nothing to follow up on. You wake up, your bike was stolen, there's no video, there's no suspect, there's no cameras, there's no witnesses, you don't have your serial number, there's nothing to follow up on with that case. So we are definitely going to take a report, and we want to know about it because I want to know the different crimes that are occurring in my neighborhoods. Because, for instance, on the bike one, if I'm getting a lot of bike thefts in a specific neighborhood, I can get my bike unit, I can get like our theft unit involved, and they can do like a bike sting operation and things like that. So I still want to know about it. But some of those cases just get closed because there's no follow-up information. If there is follow-up information, but it's not a jail case, then it goes into a detective queue, and they just kind of work the case and follow up, as needed. So they have a queue, they work on their queue, and they work on the jail cases first, and just kind of go from there. And we have all different kinds of detective units. We got detective units that deal with property crimes, fraud crimes, robberies, homicides. They're all different units that specialize in that area and work those cases specifically. So obviously, if it's like a homicide or a robbery or something like that, those are prioritized. Our homicide unit works endlessly until until they make an arrest, essentially. So it just really depends on the type of crime, whether someone's been arrested. A lot of different things kind of come into play with it. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how it works. We could always use more people. So if you want to throw that out there, we'll take it.
Very expensive.
All right. I think we can talk about the deeper causes of violent crime for a very long time. Not that it's an uninteresting subject, it's very interesting. But I feel like we should let you get on to your business, Detective Fallows.
Can I just say one last real quick thing?
Oh, of course, of course.
I'm going to put my information up in the chat. And I do want to thank everyone for their comments, for their concerns. A lot of times, like some communities, and I'm not necessarily saying where I work, but like where I grew up, things like that, just don't care very much about what's going on in the neighborhood. People are apathetic. They just don't care. So I really appreciate you all coming here tonight, speaking to me, having different perspectives. I'm okay with all of it. I will take what you've said. I'll do my best to follow up, to make things better, to keep working on what I'm working on. Things are never going to be perfect, but we certainly are working and we certainly are trying our best. And I'm going to put my info up in the chat. If you are, you can reach out to me directly as well, as your community liaison, and I can work with the different units. Like I said, I'm in contact with Sergeant Meinzer constantly, with Sergeant Christensen, his bike squad. We all work together very closely. So reach out to me as well. Put my info up in there, my email and my phone number. Email is a really good way to get a hold of me because I can kind of see it and get it anytime, anywhere. But thank you for having me tonight, and thank you for all your passion and your involvement. I appreciate it. With that, have a good night.
Feels great to say we appreciate you back. We do. And I can attest, Detective Fallows will answer your emails. It happens.
I do my best.
All right. Thank you for your time, Detective Fallows. We gave you some tough questions, like, explain crime. Something really easy.
Solve homelessness. We got it. We're good.
Yeah. Do that. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
All right. Okay, folks, thanks for logging on for this part. And then for other people who want to get into our bylaws, we've got some grunt work to do, I suppose. But folks are certainly welcome to stay and talk about it. We did a very, very deep dive into other folks' bylaws in the community. So, but I understand if people don't want to hang out for this part. It is incredibly understandable. I'm really selling it, Jeff, aren't I?
Yep.
Yeah. I thank him at the end, but just in case folks don't want to stick around. This is a lot of work by Jeff Sandstrom, who not only did he spearhead the process, but he also met with folks from other community councils, including lawyers, or at least one lawyer, to talk about what they saw working, what not. And I don't know, Jeff, I don't know if that would have happened entirely if you hadn't had to have knee surgery that prevented you from doing anything else for like 2 weeks. But we really appreciate that you chose to spend your time in that way. Who knows what all you could have done instead. But anyway, so how did we do this? We're a recognized community organization. How exciting. There are a bunch of recognized community organizations in the city. Some of them are community councils. Some of them are other things like Friends of Fisher Mansion or Friends of the Salt Lake Cemetery. But all of them have their bylaws uploaded to the city attorney's office. And so we looked at them. How fun. This is our version that we were updating, the 2016 version. And, there's some things in it that we wanted to change. We were overdue for an update. Other community councils updated in maybe 2019, some even more recently. And there's some language in there that we wanted to introduce more flexibility, make a document that's more consistent, readable, stay compliant with city code, and clarify an election process and a process for expanding board membership. Because it wasn't necessarily all internally consistent. Some of our old bylaws reflected when we met every other month instead of every month. So, so recognized community organizations are actually part of city code. The city thinks that, we serve a purpose. That's great. But we also think that our purpose is wider than just an interaction with Salt Lake City. And we got into the nitty-gritty about that. If anybody's interested in reading about the definitions of recognized community organizations, what we wanted to make sure is that we comply with at least the minimum requirements. We're trying to, go above that, but it's important that our bylaws have things about like who's a member, Make it clear that we have open participation, a policy against discrimination, where you have that, and emphasize that attendance is open to the general public. And what has not been a problem for us to hold at least one meeting of our membership a year. So some of these date back to 2013 law, but if you can get into a deep history of community councils and see that the Ballpark Community Council, previously the People's Freeway Incorporated, has been serving the community since the 1970s. So there are people who go back decades to get together in a room and talk about this stuff. Feel validated. Okay, we checked out other community recognized organization sets of bylaws. They kind of vary a lot in their specificity and length. East Liberty Park Community Organization only has 2.5 pages. I think the longest I found was Liberty Wells at 14 pages. I think they're both probably effective organizations. So, to what extent do you want to be really specific or leave the specificity out of bylaws? People have different strategies, but we went through and looked through to see, like, is there liability language? Do you mention Robert's Rules of Order? Are there, how strongly dictated are the officer roles, etc.? I know this is really exciting. Just trying to emphasize, we really tried to be thoughtful about this and look at other community examples. And I don't even necessarily think we are at a final product yet, but the perfect is the opposite of the good. So we wanted to go through and talk about what we are proposing to have done. Old ones, new ones. So I am not going to go through some line by line because that would be torturous, I think. We talked a lot about our organization's purpose. Then we went through and looked at some other bylaws, and their purpose might only be like a sentence. So again, to what extent do we want this to be really explicit or not? Also went through the effort of asking ChatGTP, but it didn't quite get it right. But I have to admit, I was really attracted to the purpose. It's nice and succinct. There's a lot under there. Anyway, just trying to say we did a lot of stuff. Okay, some of the changes that we did were small, like membership language and formatting, and talk about a few small changes we made, then we'll talk about some big changes. For example, like our old bylaws talked about how somebody needed to be over the age of 18. We thought that language was a little weird. Like, does everybody have to be 19 to be part of a community council? That doesn't make sense. You can vote when you're 18. Or maybe they're thinking the age of 18 is like the moment you turn 18. Anyway, we thought that was ambiguous. So we changed it to what many other community councils who mention age talk about at least 18. That seemed like a great positive change to us. We also wanted to introduce some flexibility about the meetings and specify that virtual meetings count as meetings. Before, our bylaws just said regular meetings of the council will happen the first Thursday of the month. That seems a little rigid because sometimes there are things like the 4th of July falling on the first Thursday of the month, which happened this July. Or, maybe there's a very important speaker and we would like to adjust for their availability. Maybe our regular meeting space isn't available. Anyway, so we changed, we added some stipulations that we can reschedule for lots of things. We also like collaborating, right? We've met with other District 5 community councils several times for different political forums or, state of the district meetings, that kind of thing. Let's see. Then we get into maybe some more meaty changes. So our old bylaws talked about board member roles and term limits, for example. Our old bylaws specified that 3 of the 5 board members must be residents. That seems a little rigid. No representatives need to serve more than 6 terms. Starting with the election in 2010, the chair must be a resident. We checked that out, talked about it, and we talked about how we could potentially get in additional board members, but if we want to vote on anything, it'd be helpful to always have an odd number of board members to avoid a tie. Lots of this language is stuff that we borrowed, stole from other community council sets of bylaws. Board terms are to be staggered, that's normal. But we went through and saw some bylaws stipulate term limits, some don't. Some stipulate term limits, and we know they're not quite following them. So we thought that it would be appropriate to add no limits on the number of terms unless there are other qualified candidates that, you know, would like to be elected instead and do so. I want to keep Jeff Sandstrom on the board as long as he's willing to serve, and I want to be utterly transparent. He's a great source of information and connections between other community councils. Jeff, I don't want to like imprison you, but you know, you've just such a great resource. Please don't leave. Let's see. We also wanted to clarify our election timeline. Again, it used to be set to when we met every other month. And we thought it would make sense to move more to a process similar to other. Oh yeah, and again, there was some stuff that was redundant in the bylaws too. We're looking to avoid that. We thought it would make sense to condense the election timeline to 2 months instead of stretch it out starting in August. A lot of folks are still on vacation in August. Announce there will be a process, and then you know, go through nominations and speeches about why somebody would want to do it and vote all in the December meeting. That seemed reasonable to us. You think December's late, but the first meeting, if you hit the first Thursday of the month, sometimes it actually feels kind of early. Especially August 1st. Ugh. Okay, we also we're proposing to add this language about liability. This is another thing that some community councils had, others did not. We would like to, you know, give folks the benefit of the doubt, saying that they are not at legal fault for acts of omission. Some recognized community organizations go so far as to stipulate that they will buy insurance, but some of those organizations also require that their board members donate $200 to be a board member. So we're not sure if it'll be interesting to talk more about liability with other community councils, see what they're doing. We also have a section that we'd like to add about establishing committees.
Can I insert?
I would love it if you would insert, Jeff. I've been talking a long time.
I just wanted to mention that the establishing committees, in some time past, we've had some requests to create committees, and our existing bylaws didn't have enough structure woven into them about how to handle a new committee. And so we took a look at all of the other committee discussions on other bylaws and how to establish those. And we're able to come up with one that we felt like fit the Ballpark Community Council's goals and structures that we could live with. So this was a request of some people in the community, and we that got us moving forward on revision of our bylaws. So that has been added. We can create a couple different kinds of committees and use those to our benefit as needed. So that's a valuable new section of the bylaws that we're happy to have.
And what else do we got? Oh, I apparently included that slide twice. Those are the major changes that we're proposing or would like to pass by our interested community members who stuck around. I want to thank Jeff Sandstrom, who, when did I take this picture? When he was volunteering and giving water out to the community. Of course I did, because that's what the kind of stuff that Jeff does in his free time. But I also want to give a shout out to Jennifer Seelig, who people who've been around the community a long time might remember was chief of outreach under Mayor Biskupski. She's also been served as state representative for Rosa Park. Pretty impressive individual. She wrote a dissertation about community councils. Very impressive. But the useful thing in it, if you ever want to, there is, she includes a long history about what community councils are, how different people view them different ways. Quotes it from former Mayor Ted Wilson about how he thinks they're admirable groups. Anyway, it's a great resource. I'm glad it exists. I cite it kind of frequently when I'm talking about community councils with other people. I'm glad this resource exists. I'm a huge nerd. Anyway, oh, and here's an example of, sorry, this was a formatting example where I said, why is an entire page of our bylaws written in italics? But I don't, and it's an example of the inclusion of Robert's Rules of Order. Anyway, that's what we got. Let's talk about it. If anybody cares to. And I can keep sharing or stop sharing. But yes, Jeff.
I'd also like to mention that if anybody would like to have a copy of these emails, we're happy to accommodate that. We can send anybody an email of the bylaws if they would like to take a look at them or comment on them. That's fine. Upon the board's approval completely of the bylaws, we will be recording them with the city. It doesn't mean we won't still continue working on some portions, maybe of possible revisions in the future, but they'll be recorded with the city when we're finished with them. So if anybody'd like to has any comment about them, we would welcome that, and we're happy to distribute a copy if anybody would like to email us.
Absolutely. And I think if nothing else, doing the deep dive and seeing the wide variation across the city about what different groups do, it's really interesting to think about, like, well, what language could we minimize? How can we make this more user friendly? And there's just sort of a wide variation about what different neighborhoods do and require and stipulate, that kind of thing. Yes, sir. Yes,
I would also like to thank other contributors to our bylaw revision, including members from the Sugar House Community Council and many others that joined us for a joint meeting at the Salt Lake County office.
That was a big help,
to discuss that, including the liability issues and so forth. Plus, all of our board members have contributed to them and spent a significant amount of time meeting to review the improvements. So
you're just
thanks to all those people.
You just want me to not, propose that we rename these the Jeff Sandstrom Memorial Bylaws. Let's see. In Canada.
Yeah, my question was about just I'm kind of newer to community council, so I don't really understand like what the what I guess I'll just say what the purpose is, or like what the actions that community councils usually take. So if you could just give me some backdrop, because I just when I attend, I'm like, okay, how do I tap in? How do I help? How do I, does this advocate for certain like local issues, or what the shape of it is? Sorry for the general question, but I don't fully understand. So
no problem. I mean, I think there's a dichotomous view of what a community council does. On one end of the spectrum, I think some people think that they're just an amplifier for city messages. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think folks think that they can be sort of completely independent advocates. And I don't think either one is exactly true. We need to have a relationship with the city because they send us, all community councils across the city, planning proposals, or rezone requests, different things to do with planning. And I can send you city code about this, boy. What's stipulated in the role of a community council. So a lot of what we do is talk about how's this plan proposal going to impact us. Or projects, improvement projects, we submit capital improvement projects frequently. For example, under the bypass CIP, that's, a community push, We're not always successful. CIPs, I think, only have about a 25% success rate. And so most of them come from community councils. So, you often need to submit more than once, or, take a step back and say, like, do we really want this? Who can we partner with? What are some other ways to get this done? And needs change over time. Who else? Kevin and Jeff, you've been doing this longer than I have. How is that as a summation about what's your view on community councils, their function?
Well, I'm chasing down a fraud thing, so I was calling out, but
Kevin's nodding a bunch.
the idea is pretty much what was written, and as you put it there, to empower the community.
Okay.
Improve the ability for communication, disseminate information, to
Mhm.
provide a conduit for information from the residents to the city, which may involve more than just speaking back what the city has said to the residents, but actually identifying issues and allowing voice for the residents to say.
Could you get that? Was that audible?
Sorry, as you
Oh,
were speaking,
no,
someone
sorry.
was calling and trying to tell me that they're stealing money from my bank. Wait a second. That's a problem.
That is a problem.
I can't really hear. Sorry, it's like a little bit muffled, at least for me.
Kevin, you're a quiet talker.
I said. Shit.
Kevin nodded. All right, well, you heard most.
I have one just perspective to add to that. I feel like it's kind of a grassroots branch of the city government, because although we have no decision making or law making ability, we can make a lot of recommendations and suggestions based on what input we've received from our council members in the community. And we forward all of that input to the appropriate people throughout the city, including the city council and or the mayor or others as needed. So it's kind of the neighborhood city branch of information and dissemination of information for our residents and business owners.
Mhm. And different.
Yeah,
Different
both
communities have, wildly different levels of resources from, the Avenues Community Council sends out a quarterly newsletter, maybe even more frequently than that they, run from donations from local businesses and that kind of thing. It's pretty cool. But and the organizations have changed over time. There's the West Side Coalition. That's a bunch of community councils from the West Side that get together and advocate collectively. Sorry, we can keep talking about this if you want, or I can talk to you offline, or I can send you stuff. But you're welcome to ask more questions.
Yeah, no, I think that was a good overview. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So thanks for that.
Sure. I have a dissertation you can read too, not mine, Jennifer Selig's. Sorry. Big nerd. Also a big fan of Jen Selig. She's done phenomenal work for Salt Lake City. Any other questions? Oh, any other questions from the room? Oh, no, we don't. He has actual work to do. All right, well, I guess, do we call for a vote to pass them? That'd be fine with me. officially. We could, other community councils seem to record votes more formally than we do, but we do have record of some of them somewhere.
I don't know the language about indemnification.
I'm sorry, you're gonna have to say that.
I don't love the language about indemnification.
You don't love our language about indemnification?
I see where you're going. I stepped down for a call that was afterwards. Yeah, it talks about indemnification from the council, right, that we won't be liable to the council itself.
That verbiage was, that paragraph was added, yes.
Yes. And the thought the idea was to indemnify council members from actions taken on behalf of the council. So for example, if the council is sued and then all the board members are sued, then the council should bear that burden instead of being liable to the council. It's about liable for the council. So the person, no member shall be personally liable to the BCC.
I see what you're saying. I think the liability language is a really sticky issue.
Yes.
And I think that might actually be something Jeff suggested, maybe taking it to the Salt Lake Community Network and talking there about, what some groups don't have it at all, right? And then other groups again are like, we could buy insurance, but I think
Probably should.
I don't know if I actually think that would bankrupt us.
Which is insurance.
Over $1,000 a year.
And so what I would love is a language to the fact that the council shall assume liability for acts on behalf of the council. Does that make sense?
That the council would assume liability.
Council itself, the council entity, which is a corporation that has no income,
Hmm.
rather than us individually taking liability for actions that are taken on behalf of the council. The council is acting, we're not acting, we're in an agent master relationship with the council. If we act on behalf of the council. We act personally, that's different. We should own our own liability. But actions that are taken as a board member, or as a council member, or as a committee member, those are all taken on behalf of the parent organization, which is the council. And so the council should extend its umbrella of indemnifying those individuals, just as the city was previously. And council doesn't have great opportunity to do that, does make that argument. It makes it a little bit easier when we face a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. We don't all lose our.
I see that argument. Yeah, like
This-
that,
this part's
like,
fine.
oh no, it's bankrupted the ballpark community council. Here's your $2,500. Yeah.
So that would be my concern there, is I see where you're trying to go with it, but I think the language didn't actually provide that protection. It protected all members of the council from being sued by the council. Is the way that I read it. It does say, or any other person or entity for civil claims, rather than from acts. It doesn't say, well, why not? You can't say that. But the council can say, we accept liability for actions that arise under. And then we as individuals have that recourse of that umbrella relationship. It's just more to try, and that was, my issue from the beginning. So.
Well, and we can certainly revise that. That paragraph was adapted from the Sugar House Community Council bylaws of liability.
I don't think it passes legal muster for what our goal is. I don't think it's specific enough to do so. And that's my feedback. If you do, right, like you can see where I'm coming from with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, the most complicated liability stuff that I could find. Let's see if I can
Small tweaks.
say that again, please.
They're small tweaks, but it's a small tweak. I think it's important.
No, I agree.
I honestly think that we as a council should address with the city council the impact of that. And that might be something that we need to pursue, right? To pursue personally. Because we have far more wealthy councils that can afford to indemnify themselves. The ballpark doesn't have that opportunity.
No, I think that's I think that's a reasonable,
That has a chilling effect on participation.
yeah, I think, we're not the only community council that is not a wealthy organization, certainly most.
And the
Maybe
city
all-
states that they require us to provide a service for them. And they govern how we provide that service and register us to provide that service on behalf of the city. Again, that master agent relationship, I think as councils, we should all be getting together and say, what the hell, man?
I agree with that, but they have specifically excluded that from being
Yes,
a city liability.
and we should protest that as council. I saw the email and it was great, and they said, yeah, we chose not to do that. Okay, well, now I need your answers to that, because that's a problem, and we as councils have objections to that based on. Us, I think.
They took it away and never addressed the issue any further. So
Yours was an inquiry, mine would be a protest. I think that now we've had our inquiry, we've gotten our answer, yes, we went to do that, Now, perhaps we as council should get together, the heads of our councils, determine whether we have a collective protest, and if so, maybe what's that with the city.
I think going to the Salt Lake Community Network would be a really appropriate next step for doing that. They're the group where often chairs of community councils meet to talk about different issues. We could, do a survey of everybody's bylaws.
Does anybody care about this, right?
Pardon me?
Does anybody care about this?
Yeah,
Here-
and clearly Sugar House does, because they changed their language to include liability to address the issue.
and an attorney wrote their bylaws.
Yeah, and the Granary District Alliance does. They have probably the longest explanation that I saw about liability. It was a full page.
So the wealthier areas, they're finding ways to resolve these things. But they leave us serving them for no purpose.
Well, we don't have the revenue to buy a liability policy.
And we could restructure it when we do that, which would require obtaining money from our members or being more bold into our business partners. But is that the direction that we want to go for our council? We're not attacking councils that have, there's reasons behind it, it's just.
And I don't think that, I don't think that was the intent of the city to actually start forming city councils, community councils.
They did, they required it, sir. It's in the city thing. I think if they don't want that, then that's different, but if they're saying, hey, we require representation across our city to improve our ability to communicate with our citizenry. That's fine, but that's for a purpose of theirs. And if they could even tailor, maybe the identification was too broad, they need to tailor it to ensure that they're only covering exactly what they want, which is perfectly appropriate and have a shoot that.
But didn't you say, at one point, they did cover
Until June 2023.
Under the terminology of a volunteer working on behalf of the city had a liability protection, but they've specifically excluded that statement recently and not done anything else with it. As I checked with two different people in the city attorney's office or under that umbrella about it, and was clearly told that it did not have any, we had no liability protection from the city.
This lawsuit is only frivolous if we can overcome it. And so we could be sued for having a meeting on a Thursday when Wednesday was more appropriate and personally, right? And okay, so we can argue that that's foolish, but we have, are you familiar with writing briefs? I have, and it's exhaustive, and it takes a lot of research, and obviously we would attempt to, and probably hire attorneys, but it could cost us a great deal to get to that point. The city takes that on, or used to take that on, and that discouraged frivolous lawsuits, but now we're open to all of them.
I'm gonna suggest for this month that this is absolutely worth digging into deeper and asking other community councils what their plan, like, first of all, if they're aware of it to begin with, because I don't know. I suspect that not everyone is, since it only passed in June 2023.
And was any of that published anywhere?
It wasn't in any of the staff reports for the planning commission or city council, so
It was basically withdrawn, is how I read it. It's just was taken away off
Yeah.
the menu.
and it wasn't ever discussed at any of the public hearings, because I've listened to them. Which surprised me, because
But it seems like the community council should have been notified.
yeah,
We had no notice that I'm aware of. Okay,
You bring out, and we're not even, that's fair discussion for another time.
Yeah,
Well, I'd like,
go ahead, Jen.
if I can.
You have an actual proposal.
Well, I'd like to make a motion that we've got more issues to resolve on the bylaws, especially with the liability issue that we can't solve tonight. So I think that in order to approve the current bylaws how they are with our revisions, I think we should approve them for the time being, so we can move forward with the prescribed election process. And we have to present the bylaw revision to the council in September, because next month starts the election cycle. So I propose that the board vote to approve the revised bylaws as of right now, knowing that we have more work to do on them, specifically about the liability. And we'll revise them again at a future date when we're able to come up with more information about the liability.
I think that's a great proposal, and I think, are we all in agreement that we'll continue to meaningfully pursue the liability issue?
I have a question. When was the last time we went to this version of the bylaws?
2016.
So this version that you're proposing to be adopted, when was the last time we went to that?
Oh, a week or so ago. Well, Amy's maybe worked on some fine tuning, but
We did a lot of changes to the actual.
after our board meeting that we had at John's office, we took those suggestions and incorporated those, continued on some improvement, verbiage and punctuation and that type of stuff.
Oh, John's got it.
I can be out.
Hey, thanks, guys. I was just going to jump in. I was just going to jump in and say, hey, I concur with what Jeff's saying there. I would second your motion, Jeff, to vote on what we've got and continue to vet this this issue with the liability issue after that.
Okay, then are we in agreement for that? I'm voting in favor of adopting the newly revised bylaws with a pledge to continue improving them.
Again, I didn't go page by page because there were so many inconsistencies, places where people were called trustees or board members or
Directors.
There were a lot of inconsistencies that we went through, to correct things. So now it's consistent with board members instead of anything else. That
Just as long as it's been done.
Okay,
So we hold a vote.
let's hold a vote.
I'll be me.
You'll be the what?
You'll be the dissenting person, and my dissent would be the right to review beforehand. I had to step out for a fraud thing in the middle, but I want to see the entire document before I can say, yeah. I think that's fair. I think that's reasonable. I don't recall being invited to the thing last week when we were working on it. Last week we were discussing in July. There's many revisions that occurred since then, and I haven't seen the final document. I think it'd be impractical for me to agree to adopt it without having done so. I have full faith and confidence that y'all got a great thing, and I did see what was there, but I want to see the document before I can go for it. I'm in transit, it's who I am.
Understood.
Then can we wait for your vote as opposed to you registering dissent?
Well, what is what we're voting now? So wait for your vote.
I actually noticed in my review of bylaws from other community councils, some folks had, a multiple hour voting period. Some people took 2 days to approve a vote or a new set of bylaws, especially because some sets of bylaws were long. Some are long, but also some were approved during the pandemic. So people were choosing different ways to utilize voting mechanisms on it. I know that's so I would just ask you to hold on to your vote.
Okay, then I'm going, well, then why don't we all hold on?
It's only gonna be the you want to vote right.
Get an opportunity
so-
to see that portion.
So here's knowing that, here's how to move forward. We're required to present it to the general council, which we have, our changes to the bylaws. We did that in our September meeting like we're supposed to. Us as board members can have our own final approval vote of it after Kevin's been able to review them. And that at that point, we would record them with the city. Any further changes to the bylaws, we will present at a following meeting to the general council. So we'll continue, we'll have our own board vote. We'll postpone that until everybody's thoroughly reviewed the content of the bylaws. And in that meantime, we'll be able to have any input or any emails or comments from the people that are tuned in or would like a copy, or any members of the council. So it's been presented.
Yeah.
We'll take our final board vote at a later date and record them before we have the meeting next month.
Sounds plausible to me, yes. I'm for, like, the more we can strike language, the better. I'm impressed that some people have their bylaws down to 2.5 pages. That seems like a laudable goal to me. But I don't think organizations function better with a 14-page bylaws set necessarily. But we're also not a 501c3, and that makes us different from some of those other groups that have many more prescribed issues.
If we were a higher conflict group, then I would think that we might go back down and precise documents, but we're not. A lot can be done on faith and just collaborative goodwill. I do want to read.
Say that last part again?
So I do want to read them.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll take a final pass through. Put a pin in liability as the issue to keep pursuing meaningfully with other community councils and the city if it comes to that.
If you wanted, I would agree to temporarily adopt them, to give them a 3-month window, for example, to give us time to, but if that's something that was necessary to validate the election process as we move forward, I presume there's nothing to put a bombshell in there. That's just faith and not faith in your integrity.
Did you see the slides?
Yeah, most of them I stepped out from them.
Okay.
That's appropriate. I'm sorry, I got a call saying we were, including my account and text.
But isn't there something you have to get it adopted by this month? Is that what you're saying?
Well, the bylaws state that we need to, if we make changes to the bylaws, we need to present them at the general meeting, which we are now. But we want that to take effect by the October meeting. So we can't present them and have them take effect the same day, essentially.
No, and I guess that's why I have a little bit of concern about you saying, well, 3 months out. I'm like, if we can get that major portion, like, within a few days, so that we can read it and then take a vote,
Our election is concluded 3 months. That's right. It's September, so I just made a number up, but by December, our election will be concluded. And if the impetus is to get it out for a new election process, then I'd say I'd be perfectly fine. I assume you can feel like, well, you can only vote for one person, whatever, right?
No, I mean, we're happy
I'm
to.
perfectly fine with that. But again, I'm happy to review it. I've got time. I'll make time. It's not something that I just have an answer to me.
Okay, we've done our job by presenting it at the meeting tonight. So
okay, that's part of it checked off.
Yeah, that's part of it checked off. I mean, I've seen the expression on other community councils' faces when they are trying to get these done by a process. But yeah, everybody has the slides that highlight the differences in your inbox. You do.
Yeah, you just sent it today.
But I sent today a set of slides that highlights the differences between the new. And
You
the
might
old.
have still been in class.
You might have still been in class. It's not, it was supposed to be illustrative and, make it easier to say what's different. These are what's different.
And I think I have the ones that we were talking, about in our meeting.
We'll send out the old ones, send out the new ones. You'll be so impressed at the improvements. But again.
I'm always impressed by your work.
This is all.
Well, as far as, like I said, that you're just been, it's greatly appreciated.
anything else for the agenda?
Nothing else for me.
Open comment. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to bring to the council?
We can check. It's either John, Jenny, or Ron.
If not,
If not,
motion to.
let's wrap this up.
I don't have anything additional.
Thanks for planning on, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So sorry to hear about your building.
Yeah, I'm very sorry about that.
We'll muscle through it. We're gonna be all right.
Have you used the app before to record graffiti, or you just didn't want it to stay up any longer than necessary?
So maybe, yeah, I just did not want it to stay up. The coincidental thing is that if you drive by there, we just paved that parking lot. And we didn't want to have the graffiti up while they were trying to pave because nobody could work in the space because there'd be big equipment there. So we had to take it down like right then. It was pretty coincidental, the timing of it all. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
yeah, but it's all right.
How do you feel about us reposting your cool video with the mayor and economic development on our social media?
Yeah, that's totally fine. That was a fun thing. That was great.
All right, I'll do that. Okay, thanks for everybody's time.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
See you guys.
Say a couple things. I don't know if I want to say it.
Oh, go
But I
ahead.
mean, we were talking about, drugs in,
Do you want me to finish the meeting and?
yeah, finish the meeting.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me
Yeah,
press.
I thought you were done. Sorry.
I just wanted to press stop.